Okay, well, good morning, everyone, or good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from. My name is Ann Coleman. I'm the Director of the Office of International Students and Scholars here at Yale, and I'm really delighted to have you join us this morning. In a non-COVID time, we would be packed into a room and followed by a nice reception and a walk around campus and the museums. And so I hope sometime in the future we can do that together. For the moment, we did want to give the parents an opportunity to get a little taste of what we have been providing for parent orientation. Some of you, I think, were listening in to watching the OIS opening last night, which was just a wonderful success. And you know that your students are well, they've arrived, we made it through all kinds of hurdles, getting visas, travel, and then we threw a hurricane on top of that for you. But they seem to be here, they're sleeping, they're eating, and they're getting to know campus and getting to know one another. So I would say if you ever have concerns about your students and your children, do let us know. There's a lot of people, on call to sort of, troubleshoot things and check on students. So, but for the time being, everybody seems to be doing well. So I'm really pleased to be joined today by first my colleague Ozan, who is the OIS senior advisor, and his primary caseload is with Yale College students. They know him well. He knows them well, and he is, along for the ride for the next 4 years, helping them with immigration and all kinds of other related matters. So, and Ozan's going to jump off in a few minutes because he's got to go run another program for the students, but he's able to join us for the opening of this. Ozan, did you want to add anything? Did you want to?
No, I'm just delighted to see all of you here. Thank you for joining us. And as Anne said, have no worries. We'll take good care of your student. I've already kind of started seeing them and greeting them on the streets. We're actually happy that we can now see them, not just on the Zoom screen, but in real life, flesh and blood. So we're very excited to welcome them all to Yale, and I'm delighted to see you all this morning.
Thanks, Ozan. And as Ozan said, if you are, just so we know where you are, some of you may be in New Haven, but if you are in other parts of the world, drop it into the chat. It's always interesting for us to know who's joining us and who's reaching, who's reached by this program. It is being recorded, I think, and it's streaming on YouTube, if I'm correct. So, so our two guests this morning are two of Ozan's and my most favorite colleagues who play different roles in Yale College. So we thank both Dean Edwards and Dean Chunduk for joining us. We thought what we would do this morning is take the first part of the program and have Dean Edwards talk about what is the liberal arts education and some of the more academic aspects of what your child will be getting into, what kind of decisions they're going to make, how they might make those decisions. Dean Edwards has been at Yale for almost 15 years, I think, and serves in the role as Dean of International and Professional Experience and Senior Associate Dean of Yale College. As kind of was the tradition from last night, she also came to the US to pursue graduate studies a while back and did her PhD at the University of Pennsylvania, and has had a long, outstanding career in the field of international education, and much published, lectures often, up until 18 months ago, traveled the world and engaged with our partner institutions and our families and parents all around the world. So we hope that resumes sometime soon. But Dean Edwards runs and oversees an office that has 4 components that I think probably all 4 of which your child will probably come into contact with: the study abroad, the fellowships office, the career strategy office, and the Yale summer session. So we'll turn it over to Dean Edwards and have her begin the program.
Thank you, Anne. It's always a pleasure to work with Ozan and Anne and Surjit, three of my favorite colleagues here. And actually, as I'm thinking about what Yale is like for people who are not familiar with the institution, it is not unusual to find that folks who work in these different administrative units around the place actually also really enjoy each other as colleagues. It's a place where there's a lot of community here at Yale. And that, of course, is important in terms of the world in which your student is now moving into. Now, I think the most efficient way to do this is for me to I've done a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm just going to walk through this, and then we'll deal with questions later on. And also, my email will be on this PowerPoint various times, and people at Yale are very easy to find. And I am always interested in hearing from parents. And when we do this live, I've really enjoyed over time having parents come back and say, I'm visiting my student, can we have coffee? So please do feel that doors here are open. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is share my screen, assuming that I'm able to do that. Can you see it? Yes? Yes, you can see it? Okay. That's always it, because, you know, on your tiles, you can't see if it's come up or not. And I've been having folks on my staff do most of the presentations, not doing them myself. So I'm an idiot here. So if I get something wrong, please forgive me. Let me say in advance. Okay, so how I put this together is by thinking about this, I hope, from your point of view. So when I say my students' education in the liberal arts, you will find...
I'm just going to interrupt it. I don't think we can see it.
You can't?
I thought it was just me, but I don't think. Oh, now we can see it. Thank you.
Now you can see it. Oh, hallelujah. You see, I told you I was an idiot at this. I have now demonstrated that very efficiently. Okay, right. So as I was beginning to say, I tried to think about this from your perspective as parents, and I am a parent myself and have been down these roads. So the question that's probably in your mind is that you are sending a student into a liberal arts institution, and we'll get to what that is. And what's this going to be like? Particularly, what's this going to be like in the fall of 2021? Okay, so here's my agenda. Some of the things I learned from my advisees since March 13th, 2020. March 13th, 2020 is an extremely important date for us. Surjit is laughing, because this is the day when we heard that we were going to be working remotely, probably at least until April 1st, as I recall. And that was following day, we received a notice from the president saying, you will be working remotely indefinitely. And so we then went through, count them, 75 weeks of remote working for administrators, remote teaching for faculty. And in spite of the fact that we did have a residential community here on campus, and I won't talk about that, I expect Surjit will. Okay, so what did I learn from my advisees? Won't take long, but I want to talk about that. Then I want to talk about what the US system is, if you can call it a system. That's a US system of higher education. What's the shape of this? What's the proposition? What are the underpinnings? And then I want to talk about what the nature of this education. And I should say this, you know, Anne told you that I did my undergraduate degree in the United Kingdom at Cambridge, actually, and came to this country as a graduate student. And also, I've worked in international education for my entire career, so I'm very aware of the way in which different systems have different implications for the daily life of students. And so what I want to talk about a little bit is what this means for your student now, to be in this kind of system, as opposed to the system that they would be in if they had remained in your country. And then I'm just going to talk very cheerfully about some of the outcomes that we believe you can expect from this education, because we think it's working pretty well, and we think you made an excellent decision when you decided that your student could join us here at Yale. Okay, so on to this actual agenda. What happened? What did I learn from students following March of 2020? Well, the first thing I learned is that students are far more resilient than we had thought that they were. We were astonished by their ability to manage the sudden shift into remote learning with faculty who had never taught remotely before, for the most part, and that they turned what we saw as significant problems into opportunities. And thus, in my domain, where we worry about things like off-campus internships and fellowships for research and all kinds of things, we watched students with support from us, but we watched them figure out how on earth to make their way through a radically changed environment and continue to be optimistic, cheerful, forward-looking, and while we were sort of sitting around going like this, they were moving forward in all kinds of interesting ways. So I learned to have faith in my students' ability to deal with things. I would say that the reason that I have this picture here is because, of course, we did not have a on-campus graduation as we ordinarily would. And we did have one this past year, 2021, but it's been a little different from all of the things that you would usually expect. And Yale is, of course, an institution which has many, many heavily stacked extracurricular and curricular traditions, which were really thrown out by the way in which the pandemic has impacted this campus. And the good news is, I was astonished by how people made things work. So if we could do that last year, how much better this year, where we are back to in-campus instruction and where we are vaccinated and and draconianly vaccinated, and where I am looking forward to advising my students, not only on Zoom, as I have been doing all this time, but hallelujah, I'm going to be meeting my students and having actual conversations with them. And I'm pretty excited about that. Okay, so before we pretend that things are completely normal, what will instruction be like? I'm actually going to leave that one to Surjit because she instructs, which I no longer do, and so she'll do a much better job. But I expect you have been wondering about all those famous extracurricular opportunities like funded research off campus, like internships, like going to conferences, like participating in all of these, all of the student-run organizational activities and so on. The best thing that I can say to you is that we are all making our way through this. The students are, the faculty are, the residential college teams are, people off campus are. So what I would suggest is that, that you take a deep breath when you're talking to your student and wait to see what they have to say, and that things will indeed, the one thing I can assure you of is that things will clearly happen and they'll be excellent, wonderful things. And they just may not be quite the shape that any of us anticipate. We just don't really know. Okay, the third thing here, again, any of us, and you'll probably have heard all about this from Dean Chan and others already, and I'm not going to spend time on it, but I am going to say something because I've worked in higher education for a long time, 5 different institutions, 3 of them Ivies, been down these roads a lot. I have to say that the response of Yale's public health team since all of this pandemic began has been far beyond anything that I could have anticipated. We have a show-stoppingly good and dedicated team of people who are thinking about this all the time. You know, there's a committee of these folks which meets every day. And I've been in and out of this for all kinds of reasons. And I can assure you that your students will be very well supported in what is clearly an evolving public health situation. So optimism there. What does a parent need to support their student? I think you need to know that your student has come into an environment which is described in the technological literature about institutions. This is a whole life environment. That is, when your student comes to Yale, there is an expectation that the students will be the primary communicator with the institution. That is, that the student has many, many systems of support here. Kudos to OISS, by the way. We have arguably the best international student and scholar office in the nation, just saying, because nobody else is going to say that, but I do think that may be true. But in addition, there are the residential colleges, there are all kinds of peer support systems. We are very well set up to support students as they move through this institution. So what a parent needs to know is that these systems are in place, and that this is a time when your student is going to be learning how to be independent in the world in a new and interesting way. And I think if you can bear that in mind, it will calm you down when you think, do I need to be concerned about my students', I don't know, lunch? No, lunch will be taken care of. Okay, so moving on from Yale, I'm going to take a deep breath here because this is kind of theoretical stuff. It's just that we think that it's helpful if you think about these things as your student is moving through this institution and this system. Because for many people, I think I always ask myself, because I'm trained as an anthropologist, so I tend to ask myself the question, are the assumptions that I'm bringing to whatever it is I'm dealing with rooted in something deep in my case, British, actually Welsh, past, or am I in fact approaching this in the same way as the people whom I'm engaging with? So I have to ask myself this question after 40 years in this country. So, thinking about the big picture of what this educational system is I think it's useful if one can hold that idea in the back of one's head. Okay, so here we go. American higher ed, it's not really a system at all, as you know. Many nations, some close to my heart and some which have become very close to my heart, have highly calibrated systems for higher education in which it is very clear what the standards are across all institutions. If you are, for example, if you happen to be German, if you live in Germany, then and you are a talented student, there's a very good chance you'll go to the very good research university that is closest to your home, because the system is organized as such, and it's not a matter of one-off institutions and state-supported systems and federal lack of intervention. And those three things are characteristics of what happens in this country. So these are, what we have is these several thousand, it's somewhere between 2 and 3, of accredited higher education institutions, which are indeed accredited not by the nation, but by independent bodies. And they may be an individual institution like Yale, or they may be a system like the Connecticut system of state institutions. And somehow or another, and for some of us, it's a miracle that this still works, if it still works, which I think it does. These institutions and organizations interact with each other in extremely individualistic ways. But there's a single structural assumption. The system is modular, and that modularity, if you come out of a European system, may be quite surprising. That is, when I was doing my undergraduate degree, there was a notion that I would move through my 3 years of education as it happened an English major, and that it would all form a sort of a kind of entity, that my degree was a particular thing, and that at the end of it, I would have a single grade put on me, which I would carry with me for life, which would say how good was my calculus. Sujeet's laughing because this is so familiar, right? This notion that you are a student who is a first-class student or a second-class student 1 or whatever it is, and that applied to your whole life. Here, what we have is a modular system, not only institutionally, but also that a student's progress towards their degree is the accumulation of different building blocks, which together are assessed by the institution to make up the entity of the degree that the student will receive. And this means that there are hundreds and hundreds of choices that a student is making, because while they will decide on a major and the major will require certain courses, there will be flexibility even within that. And the system also requires that the student take all kinds of other courses. Now this means, and also for most majors, when you do a particular course is not determined. It's not, I always look at my colleagues in Spanish, it's semester 6 or the notion that in your sixth semester you will do something or another. And here, it's not shaped like that. There are certainly things that progress sequentially, particularly in the STEM fields, of course. But if you don't do it in semester 1, you may well end up doing it in semester 2 or semester 3, and that probably is not going to upset the apple cart. That's the way that this degree is structured. Okay, so that means, of course, transferability, which means that we are able to, that of course, organic chemistry taught at the University of Arkansas is probably recognized by our chemistry department as organic chemistry, and that's fine. We don't do a great deal of transferring of courses, but the idea behind the system is that notion that transferability is important, because that gives the individual participant flexibility. Okay, the system is a continuum based on access and reputation. Access is who can get into a place, and you have read, of course, since your students are here, all the same stuff that I've read, which tells you about yield and application rates and so on and so on and so on. And there's a continuum of access, which is based from institutions which have a commitment to accepting everybody who meets the qualifications required for that institution, to institutions which can only accept 1 in 3 or 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 of their applicants. So access is a very serious issue here. I'm not going to address it further than that, but I am going to point out that it's foundational to this system. The other piece of it is reputation, and you know as much about that as I do. International ranking systems. We always look at, here is US News and World Report. Where is Yale this year? Oh my God, we have gone down. Oh, hallelujah, we have gone up. Those ranking systems, I could do, and I promise I won't, I could give you an entire hour on the appallingness of ranking systems, but reputation is very important. And let me just say, in respect to Yale and reputation, that one of the things I like about Yale's reputation is that it has a reputation of being very much focused on and warm to an undergraduate experience. That is, there's an expectation that faculty will really care about their undergraduates as well as their graduate students, and that it has a reputation among the kids whom I talk to in school of being a community which is regarded as welcoming and collaborative rather than highly competitive. Now, Sujit may have more to say about that, but I love the fact that that's a piece of our reputation. Okay, all that said, here we are being an elite institution. I hate the word elite, and it has gotten very fraught in the past 18 months. But the fact is, it is an institution which can only accept a very small percentage of the students who apply here. Like other institutions in the United States with reputations of this kind, there is a real belief, which is actually founded in the 19th century. Everybody says the liberal arts were invented in the ancient world. Actually, the liberal arts in America were invented in 19th century America in the particular form they're in. I also won't give you the lecture about that, but it's interesting. But in any case, the plan is to educate for breadth as well as depth. So not only are you a mechanical engineer, you're a mechanical engineer who, I don't know, plays the flute and speaks Latin. And the reason why it was constructed in this way is because of a belief that young people should be prepared, if they were going to university, to be leaders in their community beyond the institution after graduation. How can you be a great CEO if you only know mechanical engineering and don't speak Latin or Swahili or something? So that's the idea here. It's a profoundly held idea at Yale and in institutions like Yale. Okay, and the last piece of this is probably the most important piece. I already referenced this. When I first came to the United States in my first semester, I thought I was just going to die because everybody kept taking my academic temperature every 10 minutes. I had to, there were, and this was in graduate school, there were I was expected to have read a particular thing on a particular day and be ready to answer specific questions about it. There were going to be midterm exams. There were papers in which I had to do very specific things. I was exhausted by it because I was used to a much more independent mode of learning. And some of your students will be surprised by the extent to which this system says, at the end of the semester, here are the Here are the ticks against the parts of this process that you have completed. It's extremely processual. Now, the difference there is, of course, a mastery system assumes that we just test you at the end of the year on everything you're supposed to have learned and grade you accordingly. The good thing about this system is you don't have, when I send students to Australia, which does in its individual courses mastery, I always warn them ahead of time, you're going to think that nobody's studying at all, and then you're going to hit the last month of the semester and you're just going to want to die because there's so much work to do. Those students are quietly working away through the semester, even though there are no quizzes and tests and exams. Be prepared for that. So that's a thing your student should know. Okay. So here you are, your student has made a decision, you have made a decision with your student about the liberal arts. Okay, what is the liberal arts model? Okay, here's basically, a lot of this I get from, there's a journalist and writer called Luc Menand, who has a book called The Marketplace of Ideas, which I recommend to anybody who is interested in understanding contemporary thinking about higher education and the liberal arts. But what do we talk about here? When we are, if I were an admissions, if I were my pal, who the dean of admissions, and I were out talking to you about this, you certainly heard this talk. Critical thinking. What is critical thinking? It is something that everybody wants. When you ask them to give you the definition, that's a little more tricky. But basically, we believe that not accepting what is offered to you without making sure that you have interrogated it is a really important part of good thinking, good analysis, good learning, good decision making. And critical thinking is not, you read on the internet that vaccines are useless. Please interrogate this before you accept it. And we think that the liberal arts prepares students well for this. Why? Because it forces them, like it or not. If your student is a dedicated biomedical engineer, he or she will nonetheless be required to take courses which will come from very different disciplinary perspectives and which will cause your student to say, oh, wait a minute, you can approach this problem in this way. Interesting, maybe I can use that. Flexibility. The thing about the liberal arts model is that if, and this is, I've advised a lot of wonderful students at Yale, many of them international students, and I think about a student of mine from Kenya, actually, who was convinced that she was going to be a chemical engineer when she came to Yale. Well, she did fine in chemical engineering, but she took a course in photography when she was a first-year student, and now she's a rather successful photojournalist, and she was able to make the choice to organize her studies and her life very differently. And students get to, because of the liberal arts, they get introduced to all kinds of different fields, and because of the modular nature of the education, they get to make decisions about change, which really can be incredibly important because it allows them to really fulfill aspects of themselves that when they started this education at the age of what, 17, 18, that's really young. If I had known who I actually am, would I have been an English major at Cambridge? Probably not. Certainly not. Don't regret it at all. But if I had been able to change, that would have been a good thing. Choices. The liberal arts, I've really addressed that, I think. The liberal arts model assumes that people will become capable of making sensible choices which will promote their own learning trajectory in good ways, and that they can make choices which will blend. You know, we have lots of students at Yale, for example, who are pre-med. Only a minority of those students are majoring in the biological sciences. Many of them are majoring in political science or art history or ethnicity, race, migration, or whatever else, because of the fact that it is possible to complete both of those things at the same time. And that means that a student is able to exercise very important autonomy at this age of their intellectual growth. And the growth thing is what this is really about. I was talking to one of my students the other day who was laughing because he said that somebody in his community had said, well, I don't want the university to change my student's mind. And if you are sending your student to Yale, Yale will change your students' mind in good ways, we hope, but students grow here. And one of my great joys is watching how they grow in the 4 years of their education here at Yale. And I'm sure Sujit will say more about that. Okay, so when you applied here, you did not apply to you applied to the whole of Yale College, not a particular department. Why might that be worrying to a parent? A couple of years back when we were still doing this in person, I had a long discussion with a parent of a student whose older child had gone through the university system in Europe and was just headed straight into their architectural career, no questions asked, all very straightforward, a clear career path, not too many doubts, etc. There will probably be some doubts along the way for some of you. Worrying about what your child's career is going to look like is something that we found is happening today to a lot of parents. I'm delighted to say that is not the first thing that should be worrying. And I will say a little bit more about that in a minute. The other thing that might be worrying is that you may be concerned about the distractions in this system. It's a pretty distracting system. There's so much going on. Am I supposed to join? How many clubs am I supposed to join? And, am I supposed to go away with these people? And should I take these courses over here? And should I do, should I join the Glee Club? All of that stuff. I understand why it should be worrying, but in fact, our students astoundingly learn to manage these situations really well. So look at it, take a deep breath, and set it to one side. Okay, here we go then. How does liberal education work after graduation? Gotta say, really well. And this isn't just in the United States, it's wherever we place our students, and we know a lot about it. I'm going to see if I can pull up this website just in case I can. Can you see that? Yes? No? Okay, then never mind. Because the good news is you, after this event, parents, are going to go to the CIPE website, which is extremely robust, to say the least, and you are going to just write down OCS or just Google on Yale OCS, and it will bring you to the career strategy website. And one of the things that we do is really foster our students' progress. Now, you can't read this, I'm perfectly certain, it's tiny, but on that website, we do something called the First Destination Survey, which is that we ask everybody what the heck they do after graduation. When it runs from 2 months before graduation until 4 months after graduation. And we keep all the data from that. And the data is extraordinarily encouraging in every way. So how many of our students do we know about what they're doing? 91.6%. Tell me that's not astonishing. We know what 92% of our students are doing after graduation. 91.7% of the class of 2020 was employed or in graduate school within 6 months of graduation. And that was 2020, the weirdest 2020. But that's 92% either employed or in grad school. Mean starting salary, never mind that, 71,000, much higher than most institutions. But of course, we're not concerned about money here. We're concerned about education. And the top 5 industries in which our students were working or studying were financial services, no surprise there, but it's a smaller number than you think. Go to this website and check it out if you are concerned about any of this. There is more data than you can shake a stick at. It is so much fun and it's interactive. Also technology, of course, we have lots of our young people going into the tech sector. I have a tech entrepreneur's son, so I know what that's shaped like. Healthcare, of course, but also, get this, education. We have numbers of our students who head into all kinds of interesting opportunities, working for Yale, working for other institutions. And also, we have a very robust nonprofit and creative career advising operation here at Yale. So I put this up there actually to be deeply reassuring, parents, and to send you to the website so that you can explore all the tools that my colleague Janine Dames, who runs the Office of Career Strategy, she has put together all kinds of information which you are going to find seriously interesting if you didn't find it already. Okay, what does all of what I've been saying mean for my student? I promise I'm ending very soon. Okay, lots of choices every semester. choices about courses, choices about extracurriculars, choices about roommates, choices about travel, choices about all of that stuff. So your student is going to be deep in the choice-making business at the beginning of the semester, particularly the beginning of this semester. But here's the good news. First-year students have FROCOs and peer liaisons, and they have residential college deans, and they have college advisors like me, and there's a lot of people standing beside them, helping them make those choices, particularly, of course, the faculty, about which of these math courses should they take, and so on and so on. What it means for your student is the drumbeat of non-academic activities is very significant. And of course, there are uncertainties attached to that in pandemic times. So you are probably going to hear a fair amount of, I don't know about this, and I don't know about that. What I always say to my advisees, and they laugh because they say it before I say it, is I say, deep breaths. Just hold on and look at all of these choices, and it will become clear. And it's not as it has changed less in pandemic times than I thought it was going to. Okay, here's the thing: we're always talking about. I just talked about it: breadth as well as depth. But the single most important thing is that the student own their own progress through this experience. The only students I know who've had real difficulty are students who really feel that they're attempting to fulfill the expectations and obligations of other people more than they are expecting to, in fact, figure out for themselves what the shape of this education is for them. And I'm sure Dean Chan talked about the fact that we talk about one Yale, but there is no single path through this institution. Everybody's path is different. And owning that path is what we try to help our students towards because it's so incredibly important, not just now, but for the rest of their life. Yeah, you plan. So many of your kids will have arrived with a whole plan for exactly what they're going to do with this situation and how many courses they're going to do and what they're going to be. Open to change. That really helps. Okay. So, and again, very quickly through this, be prepared for these kinds of choices that your students are making, distributional requirements, and you will already know about those, I'm sure. I'm delighted to, and Sojit, who's queen of this, we can lecture you at length on how this is shaped. Writing. The only thing I want to say about writing is that it is more important at Yale than it is at most institutions. The expectations and standards for writing here are very high. The good news is that we don't just have excellent writing courses, we really do, which are open to all of our students, but in addition, we have very good peer support, and our best student writers are the ones who use the peer support more than other students. So it's not, if you're a bad writer, you go and talk to a writing tutor. It's if you're a good writer, you go and talk to a writing tutor. So that tells you something about the importance of that. Quant skills, yes, everybody needs them. Mine are terrible, but I hope your students will be better. I'm sure they will. And actually, we have lots of things in place to support that as well. Foreign languages, I'm a huge supporter of foreign language learning and teaching. And Yale is one of the few institutions that still has a foreign language requirement. And we produce a very significant number of students who reach advanced proficiency in a foreign language. Now, your students may well be at a linguistic advantage before they even start, but they may well look at the list of languages that we have on offer here and decide if they are Chinese and native speakers of Chinese and now fluent speakers of English, that what they really want to study is Italian. And then watch them become fluent in Italian and watch them reading Dante to you. And it will be very exciting. And again, I'm not going to talk about this, but I would argue at this moment in our global history, people are pretending that this doesn't matter because of the importance of English on the internet. In many ways, it matters and is going to continue to matter in important ways. Okay, sorry, you got me on a tangent. How could you push me into that corner? Research. Yale is a Research One institution, but it's also an institution which really focuses on the idea that learning to do research when an undergraduate is very important for the future, if a student is going to be moving in a direction where they're going to be not just doing academic research, but how shall I put this, project management. It's amazing how close the relationship is between learning to be a good researcher and learning to be a good participant in whatever organization you wind up in. Not only is there lots of research, there's lots of money to support research. And fellowships is in my division. And when you go to our website, you will see that fellowships and funding are there. Good ideas get financial support here, just saying. Okay, getting to the end here. These, I'm just going to sit here quite quietly while you read this for a moment, because these were the priorities that we established actually in 2014-15. We first established these priorities within Yale College at the decanal level. And I love this because it seems to me that if our students do graduate with these qualities, they're going to be excellent members of our societies, regardless of what those societies might be. I particularly like the notion that students will graduate with a sense of responsibility for others as well as for themselves. Our former dean, Jonathan Holloway, now President of Rutgers, said before we actually framed this, I want them to give a damn. And I think that's a nice thing to want for our students. Okay, that's it for me. Yes, our students will figure it out, and they'll get a lot of help from us, and I know they'll get a lot of help and support from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, Dean Edwards. I think what we'll do is move on to our second presentation, because I suspect it may answer some of the questions that have bubbled up in our first presentation, and then we'll have some time for questions either in the chat or you can just speak up, unmute yourself. So our second presenter is Dean Surjit Chandok, who is the Dean of Trumbull College. Woohoo, I'm a fellow at Trumbull College. So it's, you know, there are 14 colleges, they're all wonderful and they all think they're better than the other ones. So it is one of those healthy competition areas, I think, at Yale. Surjit is also a member of the Molecular, Cellular, and Developmental Biology Department. She's taught, she continues to teach at Yale. So she brings a great perspective into the residential college. She resides in the college with her husband and the youngest Trumbullian, a toddler. So Surjit, thank you very much for joining us.
Sure, thank you for having me. So I'm Surjit Chandok, and I've been at Yale for about the same amount of time as Jane. I came here as a postdoctoral fellow in 2007 and did research for a few years, and then oversaw the biology sequence, which some of your students may take. And then what I loved about that position was that I did it for 4 years, and I advised many of the students who I met within the first, actually within every year, but particularly in those first couple of years, and had an opportunity to watch their growth. And some of them went on to other things. They didn't all major in the biological sciences. And I really enjoyed that, and therefore started to kind of find my way into the residential college leadership. And I have been at Trumbull for 5 years and starting my 6th year. So I wanted I will share my screen as well. Let's see here, just give me a moment. Do I have the opportunity to share? Let's see here. I'll try again. There it is. So I hope you can see my screen. Yes, okay, great. So this is the beautiful Trumbull College. In the spring of 2017, when we had the best tulips ever, they've never quite been that good. I'm really glad I took that picture. And then on a snowy day, probably earlier this year, or you know, we always get some good snow. So what I want to talk about is more of some of the things that were the same during the peak of the pandemic and never changed, and then some of the things that we hope will return to some level of normalcy. First, I just want to talk about something that I think seems obvious, but I really find that even our students need to be need some guidance on this when they first get here. Is that you know, some people think that, oh, the residential college communities are such that, you've got all the biology majors in one college and people are divvied up by their interests. And that is not the case at all. What's really nice is that they're all microcosms of the Yale College community as a whole. And what I like is that, we are the smallest college. Trumbull's the smallest, but we're also the proudest and the loudest, I think. But the communities are large. They're all about, 400 to 500 students. So people can find others who share their interests and, maybe find someone who really had a similar upbringing than them. But it really lowers the bar of, the intimidation that might come with meeting other people. And so, you can say something as simple as, oh, I'm a first year in Trumbull. And there's probably another, student from Trumbull nearby in a dining hall or at a meeting. And students really identify with their residential college when they come here. There are two of us who are in every single residential college who are part of the leadership and also live here. I am the residential college dean in Trumbull, and so I am, full-time in the college, serving as the academic advisor, but also the personal advisor to each and every one of the students in Trumbull. And what this means is that I have about half of my time each week is devoted to one-on-one meetings with students. And so that's a lot of time, and I love it. It's my favorite part of my job. But my hope is that you all hear that there's someone right here in the college where they live. And if they're on old campus, which my students are first years, they have to come here, to eat and to use the various facilities like the common room and the library. And so it's not a big lift to come and find their dean to meet with me. And I actually kind of make all the first year students in Trumbull meet with me in the first semester. So that happens. And then after that, they can come to me as needed. We have a wonderful head of college here in Trumbull, Margaret Clark. So all of the heads of college are usually senior faculty members who have their, research career and teaching career, and, oversee graduate students and other researchers, while also overseeing the kind of intellectual and social life in Trumbull. Everything from, and I'll show you some pictures from past events of study breaks and trips. Also college teas, which, happened over Zoom, but we're really excited for those to go back to some in-person events. And also I think of, Margaret as, she's almost like the landlord of the building. So she oversees safety and facilities. And, I can tell you that over the last year and a half, the heads and deans of all of the colleges have played a really big role in all of that to ensure that everyone felt safe. And each of the residential colleges also has, a couple of resident fellows, and usually these are faculty members or administrators who live, with their families. And it makes for a really wonderful community because, this is a situation where, students are here, our dining hall is right here in each college. And, so students will see me in my office and we'll be talking about something academic or serious or, whatever it might be. And then, they'll see me eating with my family in the dining hall. And so it's really nice that they get to see all sides of those of us who are in the college. And, it makes for a family, especially for our international students, a family away from home that they'll really grow to enjoy. So it's that time of year. I like to take these pictures as a way of moving through the year. And so yesterday was a big move in for first year students. The main move in, even though there won't be as many students, is on Friday. So this is me with the head of college a few years ago. I feel like I look younger in that picture before my toddler. But one of the things that's just really nice is that we're it energizes us to see all of, your students join us. The first years really bring an energy that almost like revives us and gets us ready for the new year. And one of the most important groups of students who I work with each year are the first year counselors. And so each of your students has been assigned a first year counselor in their college. I had to make a slide of my team from last year because the teams last year were just extraordinary in their ability to maintain the quality of this role while doing everything remotely. So I had lots of Zoom meetings last year, and I probably will still have more, but my favorite Zoom meetings were with my team, each week, an opportunity to just kind of catch up on what was going on with our frosh, but also to just, they're all seniors and we're, experiencing their senior year in the midst of the pandemic. And the picture on the left, I love because, it was many months after the semester started, and we would only ever really see each other outside and masked. And things have changed a lot. This is my team this year. We got ice cream on Saturday afternoon after a training session. One of my frocos is missing here, but it's still, we're being careful and being safe, but with the almost 100% vaccination rate on campus with Yale College, we're in good shape. But these students live among the first years. So, especially for those colleges that are on where the first years are on old campus, the frocos live in close proximity, and they undergo an incredible amount of training with everything from academics to, student life, mental health, and handling emergencies. They are just, I think of them as junior deans who are living among the first years. And they are going to just help your your student, along with the incredible peer liaisons that are present, with the Office of International Students and cultural centers. It's a really robust sense of support that we have to ensure that people kind of transition from high school, from wherever they came from, to our community. So the hope is that it's just not a big lift to find that support, and there's really no barriers. These folks are really going to be looking in on the frosh all the time, as are their kind of big sibs in their college or different other peer mentors. One of the things that, is planned for next week is a first year dinner. This is an older picture. It's kind of fun for me to see these faces. But it's been a while since we've done a traditional first year dinner. And I think the hope is that, it'll happen in the dining hall like this happened years ago. We do a lot to welcome our first years, and it's really fun for me to get to see them a lot in the first few days right before classes start. So orientation will happen this weekend, and this is one of the events that kind of concludes orientation before they start classes on Wednesday. So one of the things, that I was excited to bring back in these pictures, and one thing I love is that many of our trips were outdoors events anyway, is that each residential college has, the head of college office sponsors a lot of events. One of them for Trumbull is the sailing trip, and I think it has been scheduled for this fall, so I'm excited about that. The capacity might be a little bit, lower, but the nice thing about being outdoors and having a fully vaccinated population is that events like these can still happen. We usually have a kayaking trip as well. I don't know if that's going to happen this year. But there's a whole variety. So different colleges will do different things, a ski trip. In our case, a few years ago, there was a really unique trip to go to an opera while also meeting with the director afterwards. There are concerts, ballets, many different things where students will be able to sign up for that in their head of college office. And usually there's a nominal fee, and sometimes it's waived, especially if there's a financial concern. So these are really fun opportunities for first years to get to know other first years, but also other students in the college. And so these happen, over their 4 years. It's not like they all happen in their first year. There's a local furniture store of all things that has a really cool indoors ropes course, which is always a very popular trip because as you'll find, our students are very busy. And so dedicating an entire Saturday to a sailing trip, that might not always happen. It might just happen once in their 4 years that they're willing to do that. But an indoor ropes course in New Haven, which is just a few hours, is a great kind of study break. So that's another opportunity. And then each of the colleges has a student council. So our Trumbull College Council is a group of students who oversees a bunch of activities that happen in the college, and they have their own budget, and they put on some really incredible events. One of which is in Trumbull, most of the colleges have some sort of outdoor dance. And this is, again, something I hope will return. It might just be a little bit later in the fall once we feel comfortable with that, but it's always been outdoors anyway, with like a crepe cart that is making crepes constantly, which is really nice, and a pretty awesome photo booth. We have a nice archway that you just literally string some lights and it becomes a beautiful photo booth. And students, I'll have to say one thing. Last year, we're in the midst of the pandemic, and on the day that we would have normally had this event, the Trumbull College Council put on basically this photo booth opportunity where students booked times to get dressed up and to take their picture. And there were literally like a couple hundred students who did this, off-campus students and on-campus students. And we were just dazzled by the fact that this simple thing from pre-pandemic times was so important to them, for them to document the year that we had last year. And I just want to take a moment and talk about that. I think, as someone who I sat on some of the public health committees early on in the summer of 2020, and there were lots of concerns about like, students will gather and students are going to party, and of course that's always something that we worry about. But what our students really wanted was to build relationships with one another. When the first years came last year, it was nerve-wracking. I was here the whole time, so I never went anywhere. I've been here since the pandemic started, working in my office most of the time. The first years arrived and needed to go through a 2-week quarantine, and there was worry of like, oh, what's going to happen? And I can tell you, our colleges were kind of designed for that, where we have our own dining hall. We are our own community. I joked with some of the first years, I'm like, there's sometimes days in the winter where if I don't have a meeting or something, I may not leave for 2 days. And, we have everything we need here. It's pretty remarkable. They were so awesome. They bonded over that 2 weeks, and those friendships just solidified instantly in that first 2-week period. And all they wanted to do was, they would sit outside in the courtyard. We bought a whole bunch of outdoor equipment, volleyball, lots of hand sanitizer and sanitizing wipes. But our students really just want to form connections, and that's the beauty of it. And the residential college community facilitates that big time. Another, a lot of the colleges will have like kind of a fall harvest event and then a spring event. So ours is called Rumble and Trumbull, where we have, pumpkin carving, lots of apple cider donuts, maybe some sumo wrestling and other big inflatable things, so that students can have a bit of a stress reliever. It's very entertaining, and my hope is that my 2.5-year-old son at some point will be able to partake in some of these things. All the bouncy houses, the students have a lot of fun. We also have things that the university sponsors, and we have beautiful orchards nearby in Connecticut, and students will buy tons of or pick apples, and then we have a kitchen here, and they bake a whole bunch of apple pies. So it's a lot of fun, and there's always something to do. One of the things I really missed last year, and we brought them back in the spring in the form of lots of food carts, I'll tell you. that was how we did it in the spring. Is we have pretty awesome study breaks during finals. This is my particular study break. There's an Indian restaurant that that I love, and they give me a whole bunch of food. We order a bunch of food, and I can tell you that 100 students will show up and the food is gone in 20 minutes. I actually time it just because I find it very amusing, but they are very hungry at 9 o'clock, and they line up, and it's all vegetarian because I'm vegetarian, and and the students know that since I'm vegetarian, the food's vegetarian, so all the vegetarian students come, and they're like, "Thank you, Dean C." And it's just really fun. I'm looking forward to bringing that back this year. But you know, I've definitely learned, and this was also the case when I was a graduate student, if you have food at an event, students will come. And so I think there's always a theme of you know, feeding our students late in the late hours to kind of give them a study break, and not just at the end of the semester, but also during the semester. We also do simple things. We have a screen in our dining hall, so Oscars, Super Bowl, you know, any excuse to just kind of sit back, and students will study and while they're watching, you know, a big game. And usually these events are sponsored by the Trumbull College Council, and similar things happen in the other dining halls. We also have formal events, and so there's a spring formal, and I know that that's something that you know, our current first years and even last year's first years are hoping to have at some point this year. So my hope is that it'll be safe to do so. But again, they like to get dressed up and have a good time together in their residential college. And another thing that we're hoping to do both first year and sophomore this year is the first year Olympics. I have this particular group, this is class of 2020, because that's when we last won the first year Olympics, this particularly rowdy group. I can't wait to celebrate their graduation in 2022. That, you know, it's a fun event on Old Campus where they do like tug of war and like a dance off and a sing off. It's hilarious, and also just a lot of college spirit. And the first year Olympics, and then I think intramurals, as well as just showing your college pride. Intramurals is the one thing where there's a residential between residential college competition. Besides that, we really don't like to foster any sort of like, you know, mean-spirited competition. It's all in good fun. My first year, we won the first year Olympics and the Ting Cup, which was like super exciting. I had a very, you know, I think they did it for me for my first year of being a dean. I kid, but this Josh, who's in the yellow shirt, he was particularly excited to win the Ting Cup that year. But there's just what's really nice about intramurals. You don't need to know how to play basketball to play basketball. This is not varsity athletics or club athletics. This is just fun times, stress reliever, have a good time. You know, and this last year where we couldn't do things like indoor basketball, they did all kinds of outdoor random activities, little games that, you know, badminton became really popular because it's just 2 people or 4 people, and you're able to do it in a way that was socially distanced. But even, and then they did a lot of, you know, video games, because they said, you know, we got to still do intramurals. And so there were some pretty awesome tournaments that happened last year. And I have a feeling some of those things are going to continue because they went so well. So one of the reasons I like to throw up these pictures is that you may not be able to attend the various concerts, you know, athletic competitions, whatever it might be that your student is going through. Maybe you'll be, you know, occasionally be able to be here, but rest assured that there are, you know, heads of college and deans who really enjoy going to their students' events, and also peers are unbelievable. You know, I'll have a group of suite mates who have no interest in sports, but they have a football player in their suite, and they all go to the game because they are supporting one another. And so, you know, this is just Jaden on the left. He is now in the NFL. Unfortunately, he's injured right now, but you know, we really get to watch our students grow, and not just in academics, but all across the span of their life while they're here. And it's really fun. And I just like to throw this in, you know, one of the really wonderful intellectual events that we have Right now, this is years from now for your particular student, but it's one of my favorite events, and we were still able to do it. We had to do the presentations over Zoom, but there was a lot of to-go food that happened, and backyard picnics in the spring, where the seniors, when they are all working on their senior thesis or senior research projects, what's funny is that they might, their best friend, yes, they live together and they eat together, but they may not know what their best friend is working on with their research project. And so our seniors will get together on a, biweekly or monthly basis to present their research in a, to an intellectual, but not, an audience that doesn't know all of the background of their topic. And so they really have to make it an accessible talk. And it's really fun for me to see what they've been working on, but we also pair it with dinner. And so it's an opportunity, especially when, some of, usually about half of our seniors are off campus at that point, that we all get to come together and enjoy that both intellectual and conversational opportunity. And, I have to throw this in that, every year ends, except for 2020, which will happen in 2022, every year ends in commencement. And I can tell you that I really depend on that kind of, cyclical type of situation where when we're really exhausted and tired, commencement revives us again. The Trumbull was really featured on social media a lot, so I had to throw the Instagram post on the left. I was really proud of that. It was an awesome ceremony this past spring, and I just want to re-say what I said before. When it came to what our students wanted for commencement, they wanted to get dressed up in their cap and gown and be with their friends. And so our ceremony was very simple. We basically processed we went to Old Campus. I read out the names for all of the seniors, along with 3 of my colleagues in other residential colleges. We came back, we took pictures, we just had fun. It was very simple, but wonderful. And they wanted to celebrate with one another. We also had a beautiful picnic the night before, where students had to, students who weren't already on campus had to go through testing and everything to be there. But it was extraordinary. I have to give a huge shout out to Yale Dining. They have been here the whole time during the pandemic, and your students will find a home in their residential college dining hall. The staff are amazing. The food is amazing, but relationships and friendships form over food much of the time. And Yale Dining just did an incredible job throughout the pandemic. And yesterday, for first year counselor training, I ate in the Silliman dining hall. I hadn't eaten in a dining hall in a very long time. I got food from the dining hall all of last year, but it was grab and go. So I'm very excited to continue that. Eating in a dining hall is a huge part of what we do here in building community. So the one thing I just, in reference to what Jane had mentioned earlier, I do teach. I used to run the biology courses in my previous life, as I call it, but I currently teach a senior seminar, which I did over Zoom last year. And I have to say, I think because it was seniors and in the major, and I could see all 16 students on my screen. It made for a pretty extraordinary experience. I just had a really wonderful group. And the students who were physically on campus or in New Haven, one of the things I like to do is we go through a primary literature paper every week. And I always loved giving them the printouts so that they wouldn't have their screen on in the traditional classroom. And so I offered that for the students who were here, and I mailed them to the students who weren't here if they wanted them. And the funny thing about Zoom, there were like 2 or 3 students who were either much taller or much shorter than I thought they would be when I met them in person. But I still was, and then I actually did a little bagel breakfast in this right before they graduated, because I was allowed to do that. We were all fully vaccinated at that point. Outside in Beinecke Plaza, just got some bagels and met them. But there was a lot of that where people would try to we taught online and you had to, but there were little ways in which you could build community, you know, breakout rooms, just talking to students about something other than the course material you were teaching. And this year, I'm going back to the Trumbull College seminar room. I think, you know, at least for the first little while, we'll be masked. We'll see what happens. But I'm excited to teach in person, because one of the things that, you know, when you get to class a few minutes early, those little conversations that would happen, I always would give them a little break. A lot of them would go get something from the dining hall, like tea or coffee or something. And that just didn't happen. And so I think I'm looking forward to all those little things that we took for granted, but also understanding that my Zoom office hours were incredibly accessible. And I will continue to do that, half, you know, half and half or something like that, because I saw students came to talk to me, you know, came to my Zoom room, more so than ever. And that was really wonderful. So we learned a lot from this past year. I definitely want to bring back a lot of what we did in the past, but also want to make sure that we take the good things out of this past year and a half or so. So thank you for your attention. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Sergine, and thank you again, Jane, for giving their parents sort of a look at what this first year is going to be like, what students are going to experience, where they're going to have questions, what the resources are. I think we do have a few minutes left for questions. If you just want to unmute yourself, maybe that's the easiest thing, or put it in chat, whatever you feel comfortable with. So don't hesitate. Well, you guys were very thorough, covered a lot of stuff. Give it another couple of seconds. Okay, well, it looks like there's no questions. So I really thank parents. I thank you so much for joining us. Please stay in touch with us. Ozan will be in touch, as certainly will your students. And we look forward to a positive, good year, a little different than last year, thank goodness, a little different than previous years. But we're finding our way around this new normal that we're living in, and I think we're set up for a very successful, safe, and healthy semester. So fingers crossed that all the plans work. And you know, again, we thank you so much for joining us, and thank you again to Sergine and Jane. Thank you.